Hi, everybody. Dr. Vivian Stamatopoulos here. Actually, we're all doctors. This is the first time I've ever been in an op-ed. We're in an op-ed, a conversation where I can say that. That's so fun. We are here today because we put out an opinion editorial yesterday in the Toronto Star, the three of us. And I'm not sure if the screen shows all of us. Like, we can see that right now that we're all on the same screen, but I don't know if when we actually, stop the recording and see it, if it'll look like that. But in any event, we thought, given, whenever you do media and you try to put out information about what you put in an editorial or what you found so upsetting with any given issue of the day, you never have enough time in short media segments. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity for people still confused, because I'm still getting a lot of questions on what this means, for us to kind of explain why this topic was something we felt such urgency to write about, and to subsequently have this conversation to kind of share with the public why they should be worried. And there are 24 days left to comment on this proposal, which I think if we all know the, modus operandi of the Ford government, it'll be pushed through. But at least people can have their say in the next 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks. So for everyone at home, you all know I'm Dr. Vivian Stamatopoulos. I've been doing advocacy and research in long-term care for a few years now. But these are my fellow researchers who I'm actually in the midst of a research project right now in long-term care, actually analyzing these very inspection reports. So you can imagine the surprise and the anger we felt when we saw this, regulation being slipped through oh so quietly in the larger omnibus bill. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. First with Emily. Emily, please tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Stamatopoulos. So I'm Emily Hladkowicz. I completed my PhD in Aging and Health at Queen's University, and I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. I'm also a clinical research program manager there as well. Importantly, though, I was also an informal caregiver to my grandfather, who lived in long-term care during the course of the pandemic. So for almost 3 years, he lived in one of the long-term care homes in Ontario, and I provided a lot of informal care to him during that time. So I'm very interested in all of this from a research perspective, but also largely have a very personal lived experience with all of this as well. So thank you.
And I have to say that Emily, I met Emily because actually I met her mother first, who I love her mom, who reached out to me during the pandemic, like many other families. And that's how we became friends. And effectively, that was also a part of the reason for really wanting her on this study as well. I wanted a family caregiver. She also happens to be a brilliant researcher on the side, but she also has lived experience and lived this nightmare during the pandemic. I mean, she stood outside every day, cold, heat, trying to get access to her papa. And, she's done public advocacy herself around it. And her and her mother, I love them both, and I feel for what they went through. So that's why it was so important to have her on this team as well. In addition to this next lovely lady who will introduce
Hi. So I'm Dr. Shannon Vettor. I am a friend and colleague of Vivian. My research is in a very different area. I'm on a forensic psychology side of things, looking at vulnerable populations and different types of offending behavior and victimology. But, getting to know Vivian over the last few years at Ontario Tech, she's very passionate. Obviously, it comes from personal experience, but she is an expert in this field, right? Like she's been recognized, she's got publications. And so it really it's catchy in the sense that, like, her passion and her knowledge, she wants to make sure everybody is supported, people know what's going on. And it's hard not to get drawn in by that. And so over conversations we've had, I've wanted to get involved. And again, I don't have any personal experience with this area. And so I kind of come at it from an outsider's perspective, because I haven't lived through having a loved one in long-term care in Ontario or anywhere. And even with the introduction I've had, it has been more than eye-opening, extremely aggravating and enraging and frustrating. And so, when we found out about the Ford government's, this policy or this legislation that they want to put through, this bill, it was very much, no, this can't happen. For many different reasons, which, I'm sure we'll get into. But like I said, even from an outsider where I haven't had to feel that pain of watching and, my loved one in these homes, it's without words, of how I felt and why I'm involved now.
And I have to tell you, I mean, like Shannon, and she's modest. She's one of my favorite people and one of my best friends. Like she's been there for me through so many things that I've gone through these past few years. Not only the pandemic, advocacy, my own loved one's death in a long-term care home, which was just weeks before the lockdown began. So I kind of had the experience of pre-lockdown, and then Emily had the lockdown experience. But I think what has been so nice having Shannon on board is that, well, yeah, she's heard about it through my own personal experience and having to be just a friend to me. But seeing her reaction, because we have been in this, we have been researching now for a couple months, and we've already, conducted the first stage of analysis, and we're moving on to writing now, and just seeing her level of the shock and awe, right? Because I think me and Emily have kind of been in it every day now while our loved ones were in it, and then all throughout the pandemic, and just seeing somebody with fresh eyes on this topic has been, I think, also eye-opening for me. Like, yes, this is why we need more people to get involved from the outside, because once you see how awful it is and all the problems, you can't not get passionate about it. Like people are like, well, you're so passionate about this. You can't not be passionate once you see all of this stuff. So it's been such a blessing, having both of them. Like, Emily has that COVID experience, which is just next level. I didn't have that. My loved one passed right before the pandemic began. But then, Shannon's a complete outsider, but has obviously relevant expertise and is brilliant and has been just so great from the outside perspective. And then I'm obviously very inside it too. So I think for us, what, as advocacy tends to work in this kind of news cycle, it was last week, Wednesday, a journalist reached out to me, and she was going through this big omnibus bill tabled by the red tape reduction minister. She's very brilliant, this lovely lady who's uncovered a lot of things. Actually, I think what I love about her the most is that she got Marilee Fullerton to storm out of a press conference once, and that was all over the TV. She got her angry enough just by asking a good question. So I always love that. But Jessica Smith-Cross, so she found this, and she reached out to me right away. And she goes, I saw something, and this happens all the time with advocacy, right? This is how I tend to learn about a lot of things. If I don't learn about it first and then go to the video, right? Like it's either or. But she reached out to me and told me this, and I just it was like when you get slapped in the face. I could, of all the things that I knew this government was capable of, I didn't see this coming. I should have, but I didn't think that they would stoop this low. So when I realized what they were doing, is she sent me the bill and the link to and I've shared that on Twitter. If anyone's on Twitter or Blue Sky or X, where there's 24 days left to comment, they're going to push it through anyway, but at least have your comments, and you can see their justifications. And in their justifications for why they're doing this is what we essentially use as the jumping off point to write this opinion editorial. So the first 2 points were, one, they were trying to say that, well, we want this to be in line with other inspection-based industries like childcare. So why be any different for long-term care? And the second point they made is that by having older reports up, then, it might tarnish the new or more recent compliance status of a home. Why look at the past? Just look at right now. And they're trying to make it look like they're doing us a favor by only having recent data, because you'll just see how they're operating right now, right? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if you ladies want to jump in on which point, over the third also point, and this will bring Emily in particular, is like the fact that they will now only retain the most recent 3 years of reports. So at this moment, that means we're missing those first 2 years of the pandemic. They're gone. They'll be in less than a month. They will be wiped, and everything before that. And then in just a couple years, there will be nothing from the pandemic. It's like the pandemic experience in long-term care didn't happen. Just bye, didn't happen. And what a slap in the face that is for families who live that nightmare and are still traumatized. And Emily can speak to this, how upsetting it is to feel like you're just effectively hiding what happened. Is that how you felt like they were burying the truth effectively?
Yes. I feel like I would spend on average 5 hours a day in long-term care with my grandfather for the 3 years he lived there to provide informal care to him. I witnessed so much abuse, neglect, and very concerning things in long-term care during that time. And my mother, myself, other family members, we would turn to the ministry. We would call with these reports of incidents that we had witnessed. It was our only place to turn. It was the only sense of accountability that we felt there was in terms of monitoring and overseeing long-term care, when we felt there was no other way, no voice, fear of what was going on in these facilities. And to now know that the government is going to take those down is incomprehensible to me. That time, particularly during the pandemic, Vivian, it was the scariest time. We saw huge rates of neglect, death in these places, and now they're going to be taken down. It's unimaginable.
Yeah. I mean, Shannon, what was your initial response?
I know it's one of these things in which
you went very Orwellian, so that's why I want to throw it to you. Shannon's touch on that opinion editorial was the Orwellian part. I want to throw to that.
And I know, maybe people think it's a little extreme, but whenever governments, institutions, however you want to look at it, whenever we start burying the past, and hiding it or making it harder for people to access. And I think it's interesting that this is meant to decrease red tape, but this is going to actually increase red tape in order to gain access. And how does that work? And there's a lot of questions around that. And will there be redactions? And will it be all levels of long-term care that we'll be able to access, for-profit, nonprofit, all of those, what are the, how do we do this, right?
We don't know.
But what it does though is it allows them to rewrite the present and therefore the future, right? And it often, historians will tell you that when you ignore what happened in the past, you're set to repeat it. And I really do think by proverbially burning these reports, that's exactly what they're doing. And it just means that how do we know, and linking to some of their justifications, how do we know how far they've come along if we can't see where they started?
Exactly.
And even the reports only started in about 2010. You can confirm that. So we only have about 15 years already, and obviously they've existed longer. And 15 years is, in its infancy with these reports, and being able to look at trends and see how certain, homes that are run by different, organizations, funding strategies and all of that, how they're utilizing that money. And also, more importantly, how they're treating our loved ones, right? It isn't just about how they use the money. It's there's humans involved, and by getting rid of it or making it harder, we don't know how they're doing. We can take a snapshot right now, but a picture can only tell us that little part of right now. And it doesn't tell us what led up to it. It doesn't tell us where they're going, or, we can't see if they're being better, doing better, or if they're plateauing and still doing the same things over and over and over. So, they have the ability, okay, we need to be okay for 3 years. And then our missteps are going to be hidden, and then do one again. So every 3 years, it gives them an out.
Yep.
Shannon, you've nailed it. The benefits that they are proposing to taking this down, so trying to make it similar to childcare sector, or that the snapshot is going to help us make decisions, do not outweigh the costs of hiding this information.
No. Bottom line, I mean, when you look at it, and I said in an interview yesterday, so they're saying the current, having older reports may not reveal the current compliance status of a home, but they might. And the only way to know is if you have the old reports to do comparisons, right? So why do you want to take them away? And I've been very clear, and anyone who knows me knows, I've talked about this, ad nauseum for 5+ years now. But when you look at, in particular, over the pandemic and the policies that have come out, in my opinion, they are doing this because what you will see if you continue to have the historical record is that things have actually gone worse under the Ford government. And that is what I firmly believe. Why? Because of the policies that have happened during the past few years. I mean, in the past year alone, I don't even think people realize 2 massive regulations were pushed through very quietly. I mean, I tried my best to, there was, a few news stories about them, but again, the lens has kind of moved away from long-term care after the vaccines stopped a lot of the deaths. Thank God for the vaccines. But then it turned the media lens often away from long-term care, which was the problem. Then you have to work even harder to get a spotlight on these issues. So, some people don't even realize that last year, the Ford government passed a regulation very quietly allowing now PSWs to hand out some medications. That was only ever in the purview of nurses. And now they're starting to allow PSWs to do this who don't have the proper training and medications. And we ourselves, we can speak to this because we have documented cases of severe medication errors that have led to not only hospitalizations, but death. We've seen this in the reports. We have seen this in very recent ministry reports that may actually reflect this regulation that just passed. Yeah. And what people also don't realize is that they also passed a regulation this past December, creating a whole new tier of occupational workers, frontline workers called resident support personnel, who now need no qualifications whatsoever. They can literally, at the purview of the provider, hire anyone who in their opinion or judgment thinks this person will be okay working with our most comorbid, frail, elderly population. So these 2 things alone are poised to create drastic increases in the amount of such cases of medication errors, negligence, abuse, preventable injuries, because of the lack of training and the fact that you are now pretty much letting people do very serious tasks for which they maybe don't have the expertise or the training to do. So isn't it convenient that you don't want a running record of how, the sector has gone worse or better based on policies that have changed, based on different governments du jour, right? Yep. Being able to do those trend analyses based on whatever, based on a pandemic period, based on, certain laws that were passed, certain regulations. That is the vital part of being able to have a public data set that can allow you to look at before and after.
And that people have the right to that information to make these informed decisions. I hope I never have to register another family member in long-term care, but if I did, I would be looking to see what the homes have done during crisis, during these new implementation of new workers or regulations. And that's our right to know that information to make the best possible decision we can for ourselves, our loved ones in their final days.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon?
I was just going to say, and that goes to, this all goes also to the false equivalency with childcare, right?
Yeah. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm glad you brought that up too.
Childcare, right? They have to vet them. They have background checks. You can check. You can ask for all of this, right?
And again, staff to child ratios. You don't have that in long-term care.
And they don't. There's.
Yeah. Do they have PSWs handing out medications at child care?
No.
Do they have resident personal support workers that are new to long-term care and child care? They're apples to oranges.
Are these residents that are on 10 or more medications on average, and the vast majority have a cognitive impairment, 80+%. I mean, these people
Plus, it's 24-hour care, right?
And I know, we live there.
24 hours, 7 days a week. Childcare, yes, you can have, early and after care, you can have them in there for maybe 12 hours if you have to, but they go home. They have parents or caregivers or guardians who are making sure that, at night they're being fed appropriately, that their food that they're getting fed is actually, hot and not being served at a temperature that could actually make them sick, which we know is happening in these care homes.
Documented many of
right?
These
If they have a toileting accident, they have people, or they have access, they have the ability to change, where we also know that there's negligence there in these homes. And so again, like you said, it's apples and oranges. That is a false equivalency. But again, all of these things are going to be hidden. We know that there's a lack of training already before these new laws and things came in, these new regulations with, untrained people. We know that, there's a lack of training around safe lifts, and following nutritional and weight guidelines and incontinence training. And
we've seen it in the reports. It's
just
going to get worse.
And medication, that's a big concern is there's a reason that nurses and registered nurses go through the schooling that they go through to be able to do this. Yeah. Right. And now somebody who doesn't have that knowledge can do it. And what about contradictions? And if they're just being told this, that, just do it, and they don't know any better, that might happen. And there's just so many issues with this that it's creating.
And the neglect and abuse that I saw, and I'll show a picture here of me and my grandfather. He's always here with me on my desk and everywhere I go. But I sort of made a promise to myself during that time that even once he had passed, that I will not stop advocating. I don't want to see this continue to happen to human beings on this planet. And now the fact that we might not be able to do the really important and meaningful research and work to evoke change is very disheartening to me. And I just don't have words for it. I can't understand what any good rationale for hiding those reports would be. I can't.
There is none. And we even had I wonder if the line got removed, because actually, so for everyone, this was the op-ed.
There it is.
So if you want to go look at it, it was yesterday's. Yay! So of course, I had to run out and grab a paper, because it's but anyway, I haven't seen if the editor, because yesterday was just a write-off. But I had a line in here, and I'm not sure if it was taken up. But either way, I said at one point, and I'll say this to everyone here: you got to wonder. I don't wonder, but you can wonder. One should wonder who whispered this idea into the premier's ear, unless they suddenly came. I don't think they suddenly came up with this idea themselves. And
should they not be busy doing other things?
I'll never forget one day I did a radio interview early on in the pandemic, and one of the radio hosts said to me, she goes, before I was a radio host, I was a lobbyist. And I can tell you that governments do what lobbyists tell them to do, right? Mm-hmm. The ones that have the closest connections with the government in power, who maybe provide the biggest donations. And you might want to wonder what lobby groups who have lobbied for many things in long-term care against added protections, who were in favor, let's say, groups that were in favor of the resident support personnel, new category of workers, all of these things, right? Who would want to hide evidence of long-standing abuse and negligence and non-compliance with the legislation? If you're a good performing home, then you don't care. Show it. We're all proud if we do good work. If you get a good grade on a paper, you're like, everyone, look at it. It's on the fridge. It's everywhere. You're so excited. You hide the bad marks, right? You don't want to tell anyone about the F's, but you're more than happy to show people. So this is not the good homes, the homes with great records who, kept people safe during the pandemic and well before. It's not these homes that have any problem with sharing their data. You have to wonder if this is coming from lobby groups that have vested interests to hide this information, right? And the irony that it's in a red tape reduction, as Shannon talked about, right, on this bill, when they're literally taking away freely available public data that people can look at their own leisure without having to bother anyone, to now changing it. You're taking it down, which is resources. Then you are going to have to field one-to-one requests, which is more resources. You're going to have to give the ministry, which is already time-strapped. And that aside, and I said this in another interview yesterday, I sent an email to the Ministry of Long-Term Care, February 15th, asking about actual inspection reports per our research when I was first starting. But actually, before I invited you two onto the study, I was first starting on my own, and I found a few things that were troubling, and I emailed and I tweeted out to them as well. I have not heard a response since, and I have talked to other reporters who are waiting upwards of a year for a response from the Ministry of Long-Term Care. So I have zero faith, whether it's because they're already so busy and overwhelmed as is, or whether they may have directions not to answer these questions. Who knows, right? Who knows? But I have zero faith that us putting in these requests for this data are going to be met. And people will just be waiting forever until the cows come home, and this research will never be done.
Well, and we're looking at research that's been done. We're identifying gaps. We're interested in answering other research questions, and this is going to make that impossible and infeasible.
Yep. And I think for me, and I think you both are probably going to agree with this, there's just this hostility towards evidence by this government. And I think what was so offensive is that if you really cared about doing right by this industry, which is plagued by abuse and noncompliance well before, even before this government came into power, but don't you want to know how your policies contribute to the problem or lessen it? Don't you want to know? Don't you want people to use this data to help you create evidence-based policy? All I have seen in my own personal experience is the opposite happen. This predilection to hiding evidence, to making it harder to actually listen to experts who know what they're talking about and want to help. Because if, unfortunately, helping means cutting into the profits of some bad faith actors and providers, well, then clearly it seems to be the bad faith actors and providers who are winning out in this race.
Yep.
And it's awful.
Yep. And then who suffers? The families and the human, anybody who's involved, who has loved ones there, they're the ones that are going to suffer, because we
have already
suffered
so much for so long, enough.
And that's what we added at the end of the our opinion editorial. What a slap in the face this is to every family, even before the pandemic, who went out of their way to fight for these reports to be public, to trigger, to put in requests for these. Often they call them critical incident inspections, which are mainly all we have now, since the Ford government in particular went out of the way to really limit the unannounced resident quality inspections, which were superior. But heaven forbid you show up unannounced at homes and see how they actually operate versus when you have warning.
That's right.
But that said, even with the warning, we've seen the reports and they are horrific, right? So then we were looking at just this past year before we moved on to the other years, right? So, we couldn't even believe what we were seeing last year, right? So
again, like you said, and they knew they were coming. They knew the inspectors were coming, and what was recorded, even on these known, and so it really does raise the question of what is happening when they don't know that they're about to be inspected, that they don't know that these people are coming to actually have a look, right? And it's that is, and again, I don't have that experience, but it's one of these things where, what if you do need to use these services? What if you do need a loved one to go into long-term care for different reasons? Wouldn't you want to make sure that the people that are going to be entrusted to help you care for your loved one are meeting minimum standards? Obviously we would prefer more, but just some minimum basic human decency standards. And all we're reading is that they aren't, in many instances, even meeting those basic necessities, those basic decency levels. And it's heartbreaking to think that that they then want to bury this, right? And they don't want you to be able to look back, and that essentially they're getting a restart button every 3 years.
Right. And we would expect that our government would hope to empower us to make these decisions. But now, during the most overwhelming time in somebody's life to try to find a long-term care home for their loved one, often not a lot of time to make this decision, we're expecting family to email the ministry to try to get access to reports from past years, making it even harder for them to make an informed decision if that's even going to be a feasible option or process, rather. It's ludicrous.
I mean, so not only do I know journalists use these reports all the time for special investigations. I mean, I've quoted a lot of CBC Marketplace who's used these over time to show trend increases in abuse, both staff to resident and the other way around. So like, I mean, they won't be able to use these, right? Our actual research that is ongoing right now had a massive wrench thrown in it because of this hiding of evidence that was once great publicly available. I mean, you want publicly available data. That's transparency. But furthermore, the families, they use these reports all the time to see, okay, these are the surrounding homes in our area. If we have to make a decision, let's start looking. And I refer families to these all the time. Go look into the home, read into them, see what the reports look like. I mean, that, the increased transparency and accountability, it serves a protective function for these families, let alone, corrective in some aspects, but certainly protected. That is a loud airplane. Who's this? Is that your place, Emily? So cute. Am I the only one that heard that?
No, I could hear it.
Sorry.
No, that was hilarious. I was gonna hear. But I mean, but also, the emotional toll it is of the families who fought for these to be public to now know suddenly their experiences are going to be wiped from the public record as though they didn't exist, and how offensive that is, which of course this government wouldn't understand, because I don't know if any of them actually have lived experience with long-term care. I mean, I understand that our premier's wife had a mother in long-term care, but his mother wasn't in long-term care, right? And most wealthy people don't need long-term care because they can afford round-the-clock private home care, right?
If they had experience and knew, they would be keeping these inspection reports out because they would want other people to have the information and make informed decisions. You would hope.
Right? I mean, the sector is captured. This we know. Regulatory capture is a thing. I spoke about this with the long-term care commissioners when I did my presentation to them. About the trauma that this had on family caregivers in particular.
It has been 3 years since Papa passed. I can't drive by the long-term care home. I take alternate routes to go to where I need to get to. It's the trauma, like therapy is helping.
And this is more people than most realize, right?
Yeah.
I mean, our whole research during COVID-19, me and Dr. Chu was about the trauma. That was the main takeaway from what these families went through, was the trauma of essential caregivers having to live this on the outside. And then when they got inside, seeing just the devastation that occurred from all of that lockdown. It was just horrific.
I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. And we often say in healthcare and in health research, if it's not documented in the medical record, it didn't happen. So that's why documentation is so important.
Yep.
So if these inspection reports are not available publicly, they're just hidden somewhere. Did these incidents even ever happen to our loved ones?
Yeah. And I think with that, because I think we said we're going to try to keep it at 30 minutes because we have a tendency, and I have a tendency to talk. These ones are good, but I talk a lot. But I want to wrap with the end of the end of our op-ed that I'm going to throw to Shannon for this one. But because she went Orwellian for us. But it's so relevant, right? So I want to read this. More than mundane, the privatization of one's publicly available information that currently serves a protective function I wrote this word, but in an industry plagued by abuse and legislative noncompliance. Here we go, Shannon. Subtly mirrors the use of memory holes and historical revisionism, say that 10 times, in George Orwell's 1984. While it may appear routine, this kind of selective record keeping limits transparency, weakens accountability, and leaves families without the full picture they need. Well, the public, really. The public they need to make informed decisions about their loved one's care. As Orwell wrote in his famous novel, the past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, the lie became the truth. So hopefully people read this and they feel, or at least they can see what's happening, right? And they can empower themselves, knowing that they are walking into an industry that is ever more vulnerable, thanks to this government's regulations and laws, and really knowing that they need to, I hate to say work harder to keep their loved ones safe, but that's the truth. And I hope everyone got something out of this, and it, shed light on why we're so, why we felt the need to do this and write this immediately and spend our weekend writing this, right? Versus having a social life. I mean, just the angry rage writing, right? Okay, well, at least I rage write. I mean, they're less ragey, but I'm ragey when it comes to all of this stuff.
I'm ragey. I just show it maybe a little differently.
Yeah, I'm much more. Yeah.
I'm a quiet burn.
Do we tell our viewers, Viv, if they should go online and comment, even though this is probably going to get pushed through?
I mean, listen, it can't hurt for them to be inundated with as much information as they can. So I will repost that with this video when I upload it. I will share that link. There's 24 days left. Please have your comments. Write your local MPPs. Write your counselors. Write anyone you can. I mean, if it's just nobody says anything, right? That people don't seem angry, then I think the one time, and I don't know if this is why he actually backpedaled, but with the green belt is because so many people were just up in arms, or whether it was a legal issue, who knows. But either way, I mean, he can back down sometimes. So maybe we can strike some common decency, or, get that part of their, I don't know, soul reignited to do the right thing here. But, all you can do is hope. And that's all we're trying to do, is get the information out there, let people know why this is so problematic. Because if you hear them talk and it just sounds so, oh yeah, okay, they're just trying to be in line with other industries. Oh, that sounds okay. And sure, I mean, until you debunk their claims and realize how nonsensical they actually are when you think about it, and realize they're actually creating more red tape, you have to ask yourself, what's really going on here, right? I mean, none of this adds up. None of the justifications, bear fruit. Something's off here, and we had to do what we could to get that out there. So I hope it helped, and thank you, ladies, so much for doing this with me. And enjoy your days, and reach out to us if you need anything, if you have any questions, and you know where to find us. Bye, everyone. Bye. Now let me hit stop. I always forget this part.